you should see the Power School registration link for this session. So if you have not registered in Power School, please click on the link. It will take you directly to the registration and you will be able to register. You have to register for each session in order to receive the CEU credit for attending. So we're going to get started. It is 8:01 a.m. It's Saturday. It is Alabama football Saturday, roll tide. I have my Alabama gear every Saturday that Alabama plays in the fall. So I am ready for whenever that begins. But until then, we are here to conduct business, but I know we're going to also make it a fun time, a very informative time as well. So everyone should see my screen welcoming you to our UAB Regional In-Service International Board Candidate Support Program. We are involved in the deep dive sessions from September through December. My name is Nicole Hill. I'm director of the Regional In-Service Center at UAB, and your National Board Professional Learning Facilitator is Sandra Pickens, and she will be your instructor, facilitator throughout the process for this entire year. So she's starting out with the deep dives. So before we get started with the sessions, I just want to give you some information, some more of administrative details about what you will have to do. And then I will turn it over to Ms. Pickens. I want to make sure that some of you may have attended my introduction session that was held in the interest meeting that was held in late August. Someone said their Power School is not letting you register for some reason. You need to check with, there's a couple of people, check with your district or your school person who handles Power School, making sure that you are properly listed in Power School. I know that there are Power School I found out, Sandra, since our last meeting, I did find out that Power School has made a few changes. So if you're unable to register, it may have something to do with those changes that were made. So check with, because we did have other people who were able to register. So please check with your school district, find out within your school, there should be a Power School person that can help you. And if they cannot, then check with the district. The last resort would be to contact someone at the state. And I know who the person is, but that's only if they're not able to handle it on the local level. So please check with them first. So for those of you who are just joining, I see we have a few more people who have come into the room. So we were just talking about registering in Power School. If you have not, I'm posting the link again. If you are unable to, for whatever reason, check with your school or check with your district Power School representative to make sure that you are able to register. All right, so thank you for telling us that. So we will move on. I'm just going to go over a few of the details that we discussed at our interest meeting that was held in August, as well as a little bit of new information. So one of the things that we mentioned in our interest meeting was to know the important dates for the 21-22 cycle for submitting components. And the registration window for submitting started in June, and it goes until the end of February 28th. During that window, you pay your $75 registration fee. That is an annual fee. Everyone has to pay. Paying that fee is how you are informing National Board that you will be submitting components. That's giving them your information to do that. You also have until then to select the components that you will submit. And each component is $475. If you receive the state scholarship, then there's also a time for you to include that information so that they will know to draw funds from that scholarship. If you change what you're planning to do, which components you're going to do, if you decide you're going to do a different component, or you're going to only do one instead of two, or you're going to do two instead of one, or whatever, then you have until February 28th also to change your certificate specialty area, change your component selection, or withdraw. But hopefully we won't do that. But the deadline for all of that is February 28th. When it comes to actually submitting your components, it's all done electronically. The submission window opens on April 1st, and you have until mid-May. The last time I checked, National Board had not given a specific date in May yet, but it will be somewhere in mid-May. And as we learn more information, we'll make sure that we share with you, but you will know the exact last date. Component one, which is the assessment center, there's also a testing window for that. That's between March 1st and June 15th. There will be a time that you will have to register for the testing center, but you won't be able to start doing that until sometime in February to start registering. If you are taking the assessment center, as soon as you know what day you want to take it, you need to go ahead and register for it, because the testing center seats fill up, and especially during a pandemic, they are probably not filling up to capacity. So it is important that you register in advance, because you may have to go to another city. If all of the seats in Birmingham, for example, are taken, then you may have to take it in Tuscaloosa, Auburn, or some other location. And scores are released on or before December 31st. Usually it's around that time. It's at the end of the year. Scores are released electronically, and you will be able to check your scores online. Okay, so, and I think I skipped one. Nope. All right. So getting started, you have to determine your eligibility. And I'm not going to read all of these, but just want to hit on a couple of points. You have to have a bachelor's degree, have to have taught at least 3 years. You have to have a valid state teaching license. And also, depending on the area that you're going into, there may be other requirements. For example, if you're getting your National Board certification in a language, National Board has certain requirements for languages. You have to create an account to register. It's a very simple process to create the account. This is the link that will take you directly to National Board in order to create the account and complete your registration application. And then you pay your $75 fee. I'll show you right quick. And I just clicked on the link, so I hope that you can see my National Board screen. If you can see it, give me a thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, so here is very self-explanatory. You click on create your National Board account. If you already have one, then you would click to log in to National Board, and it will take you through a few questions to register, and where you will pay your $75 fee. Okay. All right, we should be back on my PowerPoint screen on my slides. Okay, great. Thank you. After you pay, or while you are registering, the next thing is you have to select your certificate area. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about this. There's several. I think there are 28 different areas. Is that correct, Ms. Pickens? 28?
I think it's 25.
25. Okay. So
25.
the several you choose from is based on your content area. Elementary has a few more choices, because an elementary teacher can choose generalist. Because of the age group, you have to look at the age group. You can choose literacy, So you have a few options. Secondary, you're more subject specific, and you just have to look at the age range. For example, my national board certification is English language arts, adolescent, young adult for ages 14 through 18 because I taught high school. Ms. Pickens, hers is also English language arts, but she taught middle school, so the age is 11 to 15. So you have to pay attention to your certificate area, your not only your content area, but your developmental area. So pay attention to both of those. And be aware that once you select your certificate area and you begin to pursue, you cannot change it. So, and I emphasize this at our interest meeting. It's very important that you recognize, and this, if you start out in generalist and you decide midway through you want to change to literacy, you cannot do that. Once you start the process, that's why you have until February 28th to change it. So you want to make sure you choose the correct one. And if you are a high school teacher, or especially a subject area teacher, make sure you select the correct certificate area that aligns with not only what you teach or will teach, but also what you are certified by the state to teach. So that happens especially in science, because in science, your certification could be general science or physical science, and that determines what you teach as a high school teacher. So that's very important that you keep that in mind, okay? So I know we keep emphasizing that, but we've seen that come up as a problem. Once you go through selecting, then you will purchase your components. They're $475 per component. Purchase only components you plan to complete during the year, during that cycle. And I did just find out this week, for those of you who do not have the scholarship, that National Board will allow teachers, candidates to pay in an installment plan. I don't have any more details. It was an email that I received from National Board just this week. I think I just got it on Thursday. So that's really good news that they will have a payment plan available. I don't know how it's going to be set up, but as soon as we find out more information, we would definitely share it. So the certificate process, involves completing, well, these are the things you should consider for completing it. There are 4 components, and that's what the deep dive sessions are about, taking you through those components. And you have up to 3 years. And someone asked a question about the scholarship window. The scholarship window for this cycle has passed. Scholarships are done in the spring. And so since they're done in the spring, it will open up, the state scholarship will open up in January sometime. The date hasn't been set yet. But once the scholarship applications open, one of the things we will do is we will help you through that scholarship process. We will provide some assistance for you, but it has not opened yet. So when it does open, it will be for the next year. It won't be for this cycle, because by the time they inform people of who received the scholarship, the window for registration would have closed, because they're not going to inform you until March. So, but that gives you still an option, since National Board will allow a payment plan, so that will help. Okay, so you have 4 components. You have up to 3 years to submit all 4 components. You can submit between 1 and 4 components a year. And I'm going to go over that in just a second in my next slides. Components must be completed during the cycle in which they are purchased. So if you purchase component 2, that's the one you have to complete during that cycle. You have up to 5 years to complete your certification process. So if it takes you 3 years to, you go through 3 years, and then your score indicates that you may need additional points in order to certify, you have 2 additional years that if you need to retake something. And that is perfectly normal, natural, it happens. It's nothing to be ashamed of, embarrassed about. It's all about the process of growing to become national board certified. It is a professional development, one of the most stringent but most rewarding professional developments that you can encounter as an educator. And it is something that will help to grow you in your practice. So if it takes 2, 3 years or 4 years, then that is perfectly fine. It's expected. That's why National Board allows that, because they expect that. Okay, so since you have options, the recommendations for mapping out your National Board journey. You could do it in 2 years, you can do it in 3 years, you can do it in 1 or 4, as we said, one year. When I certified initially, it was in 2006, we were not given options. We had to submit all 4 components in 1 year. That was very difficult. So as an in-service center, with my experience with National Board, and I renewed in 2016, that's a different process. And with working with National Board candidates since I certified in 2006, and I have also scored the assessment center. So with my experience and my skills and my background and everything that I've known about National Board and working with it as a mentor and as a leader for it, one of the things I have learned, and I know that Ms. Pickens will also share these same sentiments, that taking your time helps you to be more successful. So you make your final choice, but these are our recommendations. My recommendation is that you do at least 2, even better to do 3 years. If you do 2 years, in year 1, in this cycle, we would recommend that you do components 2 and 3. Component 2 is differentiation. This is what the deep dive is going to talk about, but this is when you will focus on specific students in your class, 2 students, depending on your certification area. But typically, you will focus on differentiating instruction for 2 students. Component 3 is your teaching practice and environment. This is a video component, and it involves 2 videos usually. And again, it depends on your certification area. They may have different instructions, but basically 2 videos that you will have to do. So we would suggest that you do components 2 and 3 in your first year. And then in the second year to do components 4 and 1. Component 4 is very multi-layered and complex. It involves a lot of work, a lot of data that you have to study, and it takes a long time to do because there's so many layers involved. I suggest you do that in year 2 because it will take pretty much the year to do it. And then component 1, which is the content knowledge component. And of course, that is the assessment center that you would take starting in the spring, and you choose your date. So if you did component 4, submitted that in May, and then you could take component 1 in June. So you would have time to study. So if you go through 2 years, that is the map that we recommend. If you take 3 years, year 1 to do just 1 component in year 1, component 2, that's the differentiating instruction. It gives you an opportunity to get your feet wet, to learn the standards, to learn what National Board looks for, so you can learn how to write for National Board. There's a certain type of writing that you do for National Board. You would get a chance to really focus in on that. And you have an chances to select your students and working with your students. Year 2, you would have learned more about your standards and the architecture of teaching and everything that's involved with becoming National Board. In year 3, it would be the video component 3. You'd have time to do it. And then same thing, the assessment center in year 1 would take place sometime in the spring or summer. And then year 3 will be the time that you will work on component 4, the one that's all multi-layered and everything. So it gives you a little bit more time to focus on each component, and that does help with your success. Okay, so how will we as an in-service center support you? Well, first, we will provide help with creating local support through cohorts. And I will, after we finish this, and we had 2 sessions this week, Wednesday evening or Saturday, you have those options. The same information is repeated from Wednesday each month, from Wednesday night or Saturday morning. So you get to choose which works best for your schedule. And if there are teachers within your school that are working, or in your district and you're working on national board, we'll try to help you to create a local cohort. You don't have to have a mentor. Having a cohort or a professional learning group of people working together will help you so that you can help each other as you're going through national board to read the components and instructions and everything. The deep dive sessions that we are presenting now, we will also provide up to 1 day of PD and reimburse you for your sub of $80. Now, I know that subs cost more than $80, but if you want to take a day to write, if you within maybe 2 other people in your school or something like that, and you all want to meet together and have a day of writing all day, we will reimburse you for a sub up to $80. Now, if your sub cost is $100 a day, well, then we will pay your district or reimburse your district $80 of that amount. So we will do that. So you have that option to do that. We will also, starting in January, you will be assigned to a CSP, a candidate support provider mentor, and you will work in mentoring groups where people who have similar certificate areas that you're working on, that you'll be able to work on together. So those mentoring groups will begin, the assignments will begin in January, and we will take you through May. And CEU credit in PowerSchool, as I mentioned, so those of you who are registered, if you go back and register, you get 2 hours of CEU credit for attending each session per month, which does add up. Also, access to resources, Canvas modules, but it may not be Canvas, but you will have modules, a folder that Ms. Pickens has set up for you. Atlas, which is a reservoir of teaching content and videos. These are National Board Certified teachers who are modeling different areas, subject areas, grade levels, content areas, different audience types. It's very broad, and it's a great source and tool for you so you can see models. That's on Atlas, where I will sign you up for Atlas. Bobby Faulkner books, I'm not sure you're familiar, but Bobby Faulkner has written several books on National Board. It's like a guide map. It gives you examples and everything, and tells you what you have to do. It breaks it down into bullets. We will provide those books for you, and where you can pick those up, we're giving those to you. The Alabama NBCT Network is also a great resource. What I don't have on here is the Facebook group. There's Facebook groups for National Board. They will answer your questions. I know I'm a part of those groups. You don't have to be National Board certified. In fact, it's a place where you can go to and ask questions if you don't understand something. I have answered questions within the group. And also, we will provide assistance with the Alabama National Board Scholarship application. And we also encourage you, if your district does have a support program, I know that Birmingham City has a strong support program. I went through that one myself. Jefferson County also has a strong support program. So if you have one, the more support you can receive, the better. Working with us does not mean that you cannot go to any other support program. Use every available resource that you have at your hands to use. Okay, is there a question? Happy Saturday, happy Saturday, thank you. And make sure you register in Power School if you have not already done so. I'm gonna put the link because I think there's another person here that may not have been here. So I put the link in there again. Okay, so your responsibilities as candidates in order to receive a candidate's support through UAB Regional In-Service Center, you must meet the following guidelines. Register in Power School for all courses. We would prefer that you do it the day before, but I know some of you were having issues. So if you have to do it the day of, then that's fine. Or on Monday, once you get that straightened out, you'll still be able to. Use the meeting times for questions and discussions. Collaborate, communicate with candidates from similar certificate areas. Starting a local cohort, which is something that I will assist you with. I will provide you with the information so that you'll be able to meet with candidates or at least introduce yourselves. Seek assistance, as I just mentioned, from your district support program, Alabama NBCT Network, Facebook groups, other resources. Bring all materials to courses, come ready to work, bring those materials, whether you have the hard copy or an electronic version, make sure you have it, whatever works for you. Read your assigned standards. That's up to you to do that. You must do the reading. Before each meeting, bring your, as I said, bring your information to your sessions. Mentoring groups will only be assigned to candidates who attended the deep dive sessions and who pay the registration component fees. So once you go through this and you have paid your fee, whether through scholarship or through a payment plan or all upfront, all of those things must have been in place in order for you to be assigned to a mentoring group. So what are your next steps? Review your guidelines, your guide to national board certification, read your portfolio instructions and certificate specific instructions, start or join a local cohort, which I will assist you with. And you don't have to complete the Google form at this point. You've already done that. So we just want to make sure that everybody has what they need. If there are any questions, please let me know and I will be here to answer them. This is my contact information for my email address and my office phone number. Leave a message or send an email. Are there any questions?
Ms. Hill.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Ms. Cassandra. How long is a actual cycle? Is it the entire school year?
Yes.
It's the entire school year. Okay, so we will have a class from beginning of the school year to the end of the school year, and whichever components we choose, we are able to do those with the same students.
That's correct. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Yes, it will be with the same students for that school year. Then the next year, you'll have different set of students. Unless you are, teach special ed and you have a self-contained class, you will have different students, and that's expected. So yes. Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, you know how to reach me. I am now going to stop my screen share and I'm going to turn it over to your candidate support provider. No, she is your facilitator, your professional development facilitator, Sandra Pickens. She is national board certified, as I said, in English language arts. And she and I have worked together for many years in Birmingham City. She is one of the best to do it. She dove in head first when she started her national board process, and she did it in such a masterful way that it impressed so many of us. And I saw how she really stuck to it. She studied, she read everything, she went through a lot. you all are in one of the best hands that you can be in, because she has done it all, including the scholarship that she earned as well from the state. So she will be instrumental in helping those of you who are applying for the scholarship. When I went through National Board, I did do the scholarship, but it was not electronic. So it's a different beast for what I did and what you're doing. So she can help you through that. When it comes to those of you who have the scholarship already, there are things that you will have to click in National Board on their registration website. She can help you with that, because I'm not sure how that works myself. So if there are no questions, I'm going to shut up and send it over to Ms. Pickens.
Oh my goodness, she is just too kind. Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday, everybody. So we're just going to go ahead and jump in, because we have a lot of content that we're going to cover today. So we're just going to go ahead and just get started, y'all. All right. So again, good morning, everybody. You have already been introduced to my esteemed leader, Ms. Sandra Nicole Hill. She is a National Board Certified teacher, and I've worked with her for many years. She is just the best when it comes to expert knowledge regarding National Board. And my name is Sandra Marshall Pickens, and I will be your professional learning facilitator throughout your journey towards becoming a National Board Certified teacher. So just welcome, guys. And so the first thing that we want to do is we want to know who's present today. So if you will, put your first name, your last name, and your school district in the chat, so that we can kind of break the ice and get familiarized with everybody who's here today. And so I am just going to open the chat, and I want to see who is here. We have, good morning, Brittany. Good morning, Cassandra. Good morning, Angela. Good morning, Frederica. Good morning, Jen. Good morning, Samantha. Good morning, Vincent from the Fultondale High School. Good morning, guys. Good morning, Jeremy. Good morning. Fairfield is representing this morning. My husband went to school in Fairfield. Good morning, Shanice. Good morning, guys. So again, thank you for giving up your Saturday morning and for your willingness to come here and learn and professionally develop yourself. I have many activities planned for you guys. You'll see I have a lot of energy. So there are times when I'm going to turn it over to you and let you guys talk some. We're going to do a little writing, just a little bit, you know, so that I can understand what your thinking is and help guide you guys in the right direction. So again, just thank you guys for being here, and just thank you for giving up your Saturday morning. So we're just going to very quickly go through our norms. Our norms are based on National Board language. So we just want to ensure, as we're working together, that we are being equitable with our time, that we are assuming the best of intentions from one another, that we are growing. We're trying to understand our own learning, and we're trying to understand the learning of others. We want to be results oriented, meaning we're going to stay grounded in the 5 core propositions. And I'm going to talk to you guys about that more in just a moment. And we want to be reflective. And why are we being all of these things? Because these are things that you're going to have to do as you are writing, okay, and getting ready to submit your component 2 part. And finally, we want to bring levity. If there is an opportunity for us to laugh and smile, we definitely want to take advantage of that. And so just a few technical tidbits, you know, just the typical stuff with a Zoom. When you're not speaking, stay muted. And you don't have to only use the chat to communicate with me. If there is a question that you have, and if I can't get to it, and if someone else knows the answer to that question, please utilize the chat to communicate with one another. And finally, if you need help, we want you guys to ask for it. And I wanted to put this number up here for you guys so you can take a screenshot or write it down or do whatever. But this is the number to National Board, 1-800-22-TEACH. And the email to National Board is NBPTS candidate support at pearson.com. For those of you who like to get your information in writing, I would advise you guys to, take both of these numbers. I've actually had to use that 1-800 number twice. First time when I got ready to submit component 2, and I had to use it again when I got ready to submit component 4. And so I will tell you that they are there to support you, and they will answer your call if you ask them for help. And so we're just going to go very briefly through our learning targets, because I am going to be showing our learning targets throughout the day. Because with all things that I do with you, I like to model things that effective teachers do in the classroom. So effective teachers understand the importance of making sure that everybody is staying on track and staying on target and meeting those learning goals and learning targets that have been established. So I'm just going to give you guys a moment to just kind of look through those, and I'm going to talk through them as you're looking through them. But before the end of the day, I want you guys to understand the structure, content, and meaning of component 2. I want you to really have a better understanding of your instructional decision making, because component 2 is all about the decisions that you make to help students grow as learners. I want you guys to understand the relationship between the architecture of accomplished teaching and those 5 core propositions. And if that's new language for you guys right now, that's okay, because you will understand what those 2 items are before the end of today's session. And I also want you guys to really understand why it is so important to truly know your students. And when I say know your students, not just know who their family is, but to know your students intimately, and to know your students so well that you could talk to anybody about who they are as learners. And finally, I want you guys to understand how to work on component 2. So before we go any farther, I am going to stop and put some information for you guys in the chat. And what I am putting for you guys in the chat, these are the links that you will be needing for today's session. So one thing that you can do, if you have a Word document open or not, you can just copy and paste them, or you can just refer to them throughout today's session. And at the end of today's session, after everyone has taken their survey and left me with their email address, I am going to resend you these links. So if you don't have them, or if you misplaced them, don't worry about it. If you complete the survey, you're going to get an email from me, and I'm going to send you these links again. But these are the links to things that we will be doing and needing today. And so I will be asking you guys to click on your links throughout the day. Okay. So one of the links that I have for you is in the Jamboard. And whenever I'm doing a deep dive with you guys, I like to introduce you to a technique that you could possibly use in the classroom to get information and evidence from your students. And so the focus strategy that we're going to be using today is called a Jamboard. And so I want to use the Jamboard to talk to you guys about to get information from you and to see, where are you in this journey? Are you at the gathering information stage? Meaning, you might start on your component this year, you might start on it next year or later. Are you at the getting started stage? Meaning, you're reading through the instructions and the standards, but you're not quite there yet. Are you planning learning? You've read the instructions, you've read the standards, and now you're beginning to analyze your student work, and you're beginning to differentiate your instruction. Or are you at implementing learning, meaning you've developed your teaching unit, you've already started teaching, and you may be writing some for your component? Or are you at reflection and refinement, meaning you've done the writing, and now you're in the editing stage. And so I'm just going to switch up right here, and I'm going to come to my Jamboard. And so this is my Jamboard. And again, your Jamboard is a technique that you can find inside of Google, actually. And there are so many videos about how to set them up. But as you can see, this is my Jamboard from my first session. And so I decided to keep it up so that you guys can kind of see what they did. And if you will, look over to the left side of my screen, and you're going to see that I have all of these different icons that I can use. The one that I want you to use is called a sticky note. And so what you're going to do for me is just click on that sticky note, and you're going to type your first name. You don't have to put your last name unless you just want me to know who you are. And I see that you guys are starting to jump on the jam. So we're getting ready to jam, y'all. So I want you to click on that sticky note, and I want you to just tell me, where are you in this journey? And again, this is a technique that you can use with your students if you're wanting to do some things virtually with them, or if you're just wanting to work one-on-one with a kiddo and you want to see their work come up on the screen. So just jump onto the jam. Let's start jamming. Tell me, where are you? What stage best describes where you're at? Jen said that she's at gathering information. So Jen, you're at the right place, because when you leave here today, you'll know how to move forward and what you need to do next. Cassandra said, I am in stage 1. All right, Cassandra, same thing. And you guys, you can move your sticky notes around. It's a good thing about a Jamboard. Just find you a space. Thank you, Cassandra. Look at that. It's pretty cool. All right. Someone said, I am just starting and gathering. I'm excited about this journey. I am excited for you. Okay. Angela said that, oh, someone covered up Angela's. Woo, we're jamming here, guys. And do you see, you just jumped on, and you can do things like this in the classroom with your students. This one would really help you a lot if you were doing component 3. I'm just going to be honest with you, because you could show how you use this activity at the end of a video to assess your students and determine where they're at. And somebody is having fun with the jam. You guys have discovered some of the other features. I see somebody wrote on the board. That's okay. It's all good. All right. Frederica said, just gathering information, and I'm so excited. Frederica, could you move your sticky note around a little bit so that I can see the one that you covered up? And if you can't, it's okay. I'll move it for you. So Frederica, I'm just going to grab and move you over here. And do you see how I still have control, even though I'm your instructor? So everybody is pretty much at the same place. And so, like I said, Jamboard is just cool. It's fun to use. I'll go back and clean it up in just a moment for the person who was writing on it, because that's just fun, right? It's so much fun. Okay. So let's get back to it. And I might have to go back and clean it up, because I don't know if those red lines are going to stay there. They are. So I'm going to go back and clean it up in just a minute. All right. So what does component 2 entail? So I'm just going to erase. Uh-oh, it's not letting me erase because I didn't do the lines. So I need whoever who used the wrote the lines, if you could just click on that second icon, which is the eraser, and just erase your lines, because I don't want to clear and annotate, clear everything out. All right, so what does component 2 entail? What is it all about? All right, so we're just going to watch a quick video that gives you guys a snapshot of what component 2 entails and what it is all about.
At the heart, or the essence, of the 4 National Board components are students. Students are the heart of everything that matters in the teaching profession.
Component 2 is, how are you going to differentiate for your students? How are you going to make that instruction comprehensible And how are you going to make it meet their individual needs so they can be successful?
We need to make small adjustments in how we instruct, how we engage, how we get students participating in our lessons.
Every kid's different. You can't just use one program.
Our goal is to provide that kind of environment for our students where diversity is appreciated.
So then when it's time for the National Board selection of your artifacts, you really pick the couple pieces that really mean the most to you and what they're learning.
Our artifacts are the most beautiful things that are out there.
You analyze, and then you reflect, and you analyze, and reflect, and analyze more.
It's really about looking at the progress and the facilitation of learning that you were able to provide for those students to see that growth along the way.
Looking at student work is so fun.
I think it's okay to say this student has made gains, and more so of the pride I have for that student, this student has pride in their own work, and their own ability, and their own growth. And to me, that's data all on its own.
I didn't end up picking my best student's pieces, but it really showed who he was as a learner.
But at the end of the day, it's really what do you want your kids to be able to do? What do you want them to know? And how are you going to get them there?
What are they really interested in? How can I get them to really dive in so I can take a step back and let them actually engage?
I so believe that everybody really needs to be teaching to the wide range of learners in their classroom. This is my 9th year as an educator, and I stay committed to board certification.
Okay. So we are going to move on here. I was looking for clear annotations without clearing the background. And you guys see how this happened? This will happen in your classroom. So, but we're gonna go ahead and just move on. All right, so next we're gonna look at the nuts and bolts of component 2. And I requested that you guys bring a copy of your content specific portfolios. And so if you have those, this will be a great time to go ahead and take those out or pull those up on your second screen, however you're going to look at them. But every component is going to have certain features. You're going to see your overview, your standards. What do I need to do? What do I need to submit? What questions do I need to answer? And your electronic submission at a glance. So we're just going to go into those with a little more in a little more detail. So within your component, everybody, regardless of what your component area is, you're going to have an overview. I would advise you to go back and read through that overview so that you can know what that component is talking about, so that you can know what it is all about. So your overview is going to tell you very briefly what component 2 entails. It is going to tell you what you're going to select, the work samples that you're going to select for your students. It is going to tell you what you are going to be doing to successfully complete component 2. And then you're going to have another section that is going to tell you or show you, shall I say, your standards. And this is very important because when you are writing for component 2, you need to make sure that if you're not familiar with all of the standards, you have familiarized, as Ms. Hill said earlier, you need to familiarize yourself with the standards that are applicable to component 2. So for component 2, I knew that my standards were knowledge of students, fairness, equity, and diversity, instructional design. And so here's the thing, guys, when you start reading through those standards at first, it is going to be a bit overwhelming because there's a lot of language there. But one of the things that I did in preparing for component 2, I used a graphic organizer to help me begin to break down the language of the standard. So when I saw keywords and features, I just copied and pasted it into my document. And then I kind of talked about it a little bit in my mind. So I was working metacognitively. And so I've given you guys those tools inside of your resource folder so that as you're going through the component, you can start kind of going through and picking out chunks of information that are relevant to you. So I remember one of the things in my knowledge of students, they continuously talked about the youth culture. And so I had to read and understand, well, what is the youth culture? What does this mean? So that as I began to write, I went back to my graphic organizer and I looked at where I had taken notes on the youth culture, and I could talk about that. I could say, well, you know, I changed the literature that I was using with my students because I understood their youth culture and I understood things that were relevant to my students. So you kind of do it like that, and you weave the language of the standard into your writing. So you want to make sure, guys, that you are familiar with the standards that are applicable for your particular component. All right, you're going to see another section that says, what do I need to do? They're going to tell you what you need to do for that particular component, in our case, component 2. They're going to tell you that you need to demonstrate how you use differentiated instruction. They're going to tell you what you need to do. And so that's an important. And so as I am going through these, you can just kind of go through it on yours and take some notes as I go through. And then the next section is going to be, what do I need to submit? So if you're wondering, well, gosh, this seems like a lot, I don't know what to submit, they're going to tell you what to submit, like your completed contextual information. And so let me just backtrack a little bit. So the example that I am showing you came from my certification area. So I am showing you the content component for early adolescence English language arts. So this is how mine look. So what you have to submit might look a little differently, but you are going to have a what do I need to submit section, and they're going to tell you about how many pages you need to have. So for my written commentary, my written commentary could not be no more than 13 pages. And so the thing to know about that is National Board is going to tell you how many pages you need to have. And if you submit anything over the required amount of pages, they're not going to consider it. They're just not going to read it. And so if they tell you that you need to use a Word document that has 1-inch margins on all sides, before you start writing, you need to make sure that you have 1-inch margins. Because if you do not have 1-inch margins, they're not going to read your work. If National Board tells you a particular font type that they want you to use, in my case, it was Arial 11 points, you need to make sure that your whole paper is written in Arial 11 points. Otherwise, they're not going to read it. So you need to just be familiar with those things. And finally, this is the heartbeat. This is the nitty gritty. What do I write? Because a lot of people are like, well, you know what? I hear all of this stuff, but how do I know exactly what it is that I need to write? They're going to tell you. The questions that you're going to use as a model or as an outline for what you need to write are going to be always in the italicized type font. So for my instructional content, I knew what I needed to write about because they gave me my prompts. And so what I had to do was ensure that I did exactly what they told me to do. Now, I'm going to give you guys a hint. Something that I did that helped me significantly, and I think that it will help you as well. When you are preparing to write, copy and paste the question that you're focusing on into your Word document, and then turn it another color. All right, I would tell you to highlight it yellow or turn it red so that you can have that reminder that you need to go back and remove it. And if you will keep that question on your Word document, and like I said, change it so that it's another color or bold it, highlight it, do what you do, it will keep you focused on what National Board is asking you to do. Because sometimes as you start writing, you'll find yourself going off on a tangent and maybe giving them additional information, whereas it's always good to give additional information. They're not going to give you credit for it. So National Board writing is a different kind of writing. If you can think about like a resume, National Board is going to be like resume writing. You know how resume writing is just to the point. That's how National Board writing is going to be. So you have those questions, copy and paste them into your Word document, and just make sure that you are responding to the questions. And so this was my instructional context. Down here, this is the student as reader. I knew what to write about because my questions were right there. And one additional thing that having those questions on your page will do for you, it will help your mentor, because now your mentor can read those questions and know what your writing should look like or know what your writing is all about. So just make sure that you have that you do that as you are preparing. Copy and paste those questions. And then you're going to have your electronic submission at a glance. And in your electronic submission at a glance, your electronic submission at a glance is going to give you a breakdown of everything that you are going to have to do. It's going to show you everything. And it's going to show you how many files you need to submit. So if you will look at mine, it shows you I had to submit 4 files. One file was my contextual information sheet. The other file was my written commentary. The other file was my student work packets. All right. And I think I may have had to submit a little bit more, but I think that I just sorry about that, y'all. I just gave you guys a snapshot so that you can know that that information is there for you. All right, so again, let's just recap. What do you need to do for component 2? You need to show evidence of your planning and teaching skills. And the questions are going to ask you particular questions about your evidence. About your planning and about your teaching skills. You need to show evidence of your ability to describe, analyze, and evaluate student work. And so as you're writing, it's going to start to look like this. You're going to describe what you did in the classroom. You may say something like, I used a Jamboard with, and you can say the student's first name, you just can't say their first and last name, but I always like to give my kids pseudonyms. So you may say, I use a Jamboard with Bradley because I wanted him to be reflective and show me what he learned. Bradley was able to successfully describe the different stages of the writing process. And I'm going to so I described what he did. Now I'm going to analyze, and I'm going to say, this showed me that the graphic organizers that I used with Bradley were actually indeed making an impact. Moving forward, I did notice that Bradley was still using simple sentences. So in the future, I plan to like that. And so that's how you write for National Board. It is going to be first person writing. So if you've ever been in graduate school and you know how they want you to write in a collegial manner, kick that out the door. It's not that type of writing. Your writing is going to be first person writing, you describing, analyzing, and evaluating your student work samples. And so you're going to show evidence that you differentiated the instruction. How are you making those adjustments and those changes when your kids don't get it? How do you know how to move them to the next level? How are you using your student work samples to be a reflective practitioner? How are you growing because of things that your kiddos did in the classroom? So again, what do I need to submit? You're going to submit your contextual information sheet. And in your contextual information sheet, basically, you're going to paint a picture of your class. You're going to talk about what your class looks like. For my component 2, I could tell you that I had a small class of reluctant learners. I could tell you that as a whole, they were not in the habit of having to do a lot of work that challenged them in one setting. I could tell you about that class. You're going to describe your class. I could tell you that I had in that classroom 5 boys and 6 girls. I could tell you about their home background. Those are the types of things that they're going to ask you in the contextual information. And then in your written commentary, you're going to answer the questions that are in italics. And I cannot stress enough the importance of making sure that you understand those questions, because you don't want to give them a lot of things that they're not asking for, or you're not going to score very well. What do I need to submit? You're going to submit prompts. And your prompts are basically going to be the directions that you gave your kiddos. You're going to describe the learning task, and that is going to be your prompts. You're going to submit samples. You're going to have to submit work samples for 2 students. Now, everybody's particular content area is going to look different. So they're going to tell you what to do for your particular content area. But just think about that. You are going to have to submit samples, and I'm going to give you guys some suggestions about how you can do that and really get a lot of bang for your buck. And you're going to have to submit rubrics for every assignment that you submit. So as you begin to start planning your lessons, you want to start attaching rubrics to those work samples, because you are going to have to attach a rubric that shows what it is that your kiddos are learning. And so let's just stop real quick. And if you need to take a minute to get up and stretch, you can get up and stretch. Go get you a drink of water very quickly. If you have it to the side of your table, as we just stop and do and to see how well we are making it through and staying on target. So one of our learning targets was to understand the structure, the content, and the meaning of component 2. So I've gone through the structure with you. I'm still working on the content, okay? And we watched the video, which told us about the meaning of component 2. So we're on track. So we're gonna keep it moving. And now we're going to talk about the significance of instructional decision making. Now, these are your 5 core propositions. For those of you who downloaded What Students Should Know and Be Able to Do, what students should know and be able to do is just a more extensive showing of the 5 core propositions. So think about your 5 core propositions like this. If you were in the medical field, in the medical profession, you would have the Hippocratic Oath. And the Hippocratic Oath just simply means do no harm. These are things that doctors do to do no harm to their patients. Now, our 5 core propositions, if we had a Hippocratic Oath, it would be the 5 core propositions. These are the things that we as teachers should practice to ensure that we're doing no harm to students and that we're doing everything in our power to help students. Now, for those of you who are planning to apply for the scholarship. If you're planning to apply for the scholarship, let me know who you are by typing in the word me in the chat. Just type me, because I'm gonna tell you guys how you can go ahead and get started. So we have one person who said me, if you're planning to apply for the scholarship. So several of you guys, I see a lot of me's coming up. Several of you guys are planning to apply for the scholarship. So one thing that you can do to help you begin to apply for the scholarship, because I applied for it about 3-4 years ago. And the most difficult part of the scholarship is you're going to have to write an essay, right? And in that essay, you're going to have to show how the 5 core propositions are realized in your instruction. And so if you're planning to apply for the scholarship, and if you want to go ahead and get a jump start on it, one thing that you can do is look at those 5 core propositions and start making a list of all of the things that you do as a classroom leader to really flesh out that particular proposition. So if you have teachers are committed to students and their learning, what are some things that you do in your classroom to show that students are committed, that you are committed to your students and you're committed to their learning? So that's just a little something to just kind of help you guys who are planning to get that scholarship. Just know that that's one of the things that they're going to ask you to do. And that's the hardest part of the scholarship. They're going to give you X number of words that you can use. So you really want to use your words judiciously, but just know that that's there for you. And so I have a star by components 1 and 3, because these are the 2 that we're really going to kind of focus on a little bit more than the others. Okay, so now we're going to look at in more detail the relationship between the architecture of accomplished teaching and those 5 core propositions. So I've been talking to you guys about the architecture of accomplished teaching and what is underneath the surface. And so we're going to watch a video that I think really gives you guys a good description of what the architecture is and how it relates to the 5 core proposition. And then we're going to come back and do an act.
We've all had a great teacher somewhere along the line, maybe in school, in our communities, in our families. What did that person do to make such a difference? Great teachers inspire, design, and orchestrate learning in ways that facilitate student success. Their choices are not accidental. They are the result of thoughtful, intentional decisions based on their expertise and the standards of practice that guide their profession. If we were to peel back the layers to get a good look at the design behind great teaching, what would we see? The architecture of accomplished teaching is a part of every great teacher's DNA. They know that teaching and learning are not separate, and both move forward only if the teacher and the learner are in sync every step of the way. The architecture of accomplished teaching is a cycle of inquiry illuminated by 6 signposts. Knowing your students, setting high, worthwhile goals, planning and implementing meaningful instruction, designing and analyzing quality assessments, and reflecting to set new, high, and worthwhile goals. It all starts with knowing your students. What do I know about my students, their families, cultures, and communities? What are their interests and ways of learning? How does this impact what they need from me and how I move forward to address their learning needs? Goals. Given what I know about them, what goals should I set to help these students discover their own path towards brilliance? Instruction. What lessons and strategies will lead these students towards these goals? What will make these experiences relevant and meaningful for who they are and what's important to them? Assessment. How will I know if my students met the goals? Do my assessments accurately reflect what I taught and what was learned? Reflect. Which choices did I make that moved students forward? What might I do differently? And finally, set new goals. What have I learned from my students that will help me set new, high, and worthwhile goals? Learning is forever forward, and it doesn't begin and end with the school day. This cycle continues on. Always focus on these students at this time. The architecture is an intricate design of the 5 core propositions and professional teaching standards in action. Consider again that teacher who helped you find your brilliance. Can you see the architecture at work?
Okay. So I am going to be talking about the 5 core propositions and showing you guys how it is realized in the architecture of accomplished teaching. And then I'm going to come over to my green board to talk to you guys about the big ideas regarding instruction as it pertains to component 2. So we'll begin by looking at our first core proposition, which is teachers are committed to students and their learning. Y'all, this is why we're here, right? We're here because we are committed to our students and because we are committed to their learning. We're trying to become National Board Certified teachers so that we can improve ourselves, so that we can improve our students, okay? So when we look at the first core proposition, I want you guys to come over and look at the first item in our helix that says your students. Who are they? Where are they now? What do they need? And in what order do they need it? Where do I begin working with my students? Who are your students? Who are they? Let's come over to the second item in our helix. And we have set high, worthwhile goals appropriate for these students at this time in this setting. So it's not just understanding who my students are, but you have to be able to talk about who your students are at this time in this setting. And our kids are going through some difficult things during this time. They're in a pandemic, okay? We have kids who are going through different experiences and problems at home. How do you know that? Okay, and so let's come back to one of our big ideas. You got to show that you know your students. And it's not just you talking about, well, I know, you know, such and such came from a such and such kind of background, but you have to have some evidence to show that you know your students. Parent conferences, notes from parent conferences. One of the things that we recommend everybody do at the beginning of the cycle is give your students a survey and let them tell you how they learn best. Now, I've given you guys 2 surveys in the resources folder that you can use, but give your students a survey. Let them take it and then sit down and talk to them about the results. You're going to be so shocked and surprised at what they reveal to you when they get to tell you who they are as learners in their own words. So one of the big ideas regarding instruction in component 2 is you gotta know your students, right? So let's come back to core proposition number 2. Teachers know their subjects and they know how to teach their subjects to your students. And this is why I would recommend you to, have been teaching for a few years, because you're going to have to show that you know your content and that you know your students. I mean, your subject. When I was working with my students, and mind you, I had to borrow a class every year, because when I did National Board, I wasn't in the classroom. I was actually working as a mentor teacher for the district. So I had to borrow a class. And because I had really gotten to know that small class that I had, I knew that I had many kids who played sports and they had leadership positions on their teams. And I learned this from getting to know them. So when I picked my literature, I also knew that these were kids who had not been exposed to, we call it classic, but in National Board, they're going to call it canonical pieces of text. And so I let them read Walt Whitman's "Oh Captain, My Captain." And I did a lot of activities with those kids that talked about leadership and having a captain and what happens when you lose your leader or your captain. And they did very well with it, but they got bored with it after a minute. And so because I knew my students and my content and I understood their youth culture, I did a little research and I found some books by Sharon G. Flake for girls and for boys that it was contemporary piece for kids their age. And so I could talk about that, you know what I'm saying? Because I knew my content. I knew how to go find those different types of literature. So, which brings us back to our next big idea. You're gonna have to show that you know your content and you know your curriculum. So everything just kind of works together. And so next we have core prop 3. Teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring their learning, student learning, very important in component 3. You are responsible for managing and for monitoring the learning of your students. You're going to have to show evidence of that, which brings us to our helix, the 4th item on our helix under the architecture of accomplished teaching. Evaluate student learning in light of the goals and instruction. And I'm going to come up to the 6th item on our helix. Set new high worthwhile goals for these students at this time. Because just because I taught students in the 8th grade, it did not mean that they were working at 8th grade level. And as a matter of fact, they weren't. Most of the kids that I worked with were probably working at a 6th grade level. So I had to get work that I could give those students and show that I was going to move them to a higher level, because that's where they were at that time. But when I finished with them, they were no longer at that low place. All right, let's look at core prop 4. Teachers think systematically about their practice and they learn from their experience. While you are writing for component 2, you're going to have to constantly reflect on what you learned and how that learning will inform your instruction in the future. And so let's look at the 5th item on our helix. Reflect on student learning and the effectiveness of the instructional design, particular concerns and ideas. So you're going to be continuously reflecting. As I reflect, or this showed me. And that's how you're going to write up your reflection. And so again, let's come back to the green board. Big idea regarding instruction in component 2, you're going to have to be a reflective practitioner. You're going to have to show the process that you undergo to reflect on instruction. My apologies, guys. All right, and so now we're going to come back to our Jamboard, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to kind of, and if you want to, on this one, I am going to ask that some of you guys unmute, but how do you decide what instructional adjustments to make for your students? I want to hear from you guys. How do you decide when to make changes for your kiddos? And we didn't get a whole lot on this one, but I just showed you what some of my, what they wrote from the last one. So we have someone use exit slips from the day before. That's a good way to kind of figure out what your students know. That's a good formative assessment. And I wanted to leave these up for you guys because I really want you to see some things that some of your colleagues are saying as well. Sometimes we do better when we can learn from one another. So how do you decide what instructional adjustments to make for your students? What are some things that you do? Someone from our last session said, I use formative assessments too. Someone else just posted, just jumped in and gave us a new jam. We have during class, small group discussions. I can see who really gets it and who doesn't. Okay. Good morning. And if you want to unmute and talk about what you read, what you've written, please feel free to do that.
Well, I'm driving, so I can't do the jam board, but I'll unmute.
It's okay.
A lot of times I do utilize formative assessments like polls or impromptu discussions, but sometimes you just have to gauge student interest and assess how they're responding during the lesson to see what you may need to do differently to increase their interest in what you're talking about.
Okay, so what you're saying is you use, is it like a visual observation?
Visual observations are a great tool for 9th grade.
Yes. And so that's how you would write it up. Now, let me ask you something, because remember, component 2 is all about differentiating instruction. So after you've done your visual and you've determined that your kiddo doesn't get it, what would be something that you would do next?
Oh, good question. Usually once I notice it, like let's say third block that this group or these kids didn't get it, I kind of go back and restructure the lesson to meet their need, because usually I know why John is not engaged. So sometimes I do small group with them. If it's one-on-one, provide video approach, like where I record and add music because they are engaged with that. It just varies and depends on the student how I adjust that deficit or issue.
And so, Samantha, how you would write that, you would say, you know, I conducted a visual observation and I noticed that John still did not understand the concept. So I changed my instructional approach and I like that. So that's how you would, that's why I was asking you those questions. So that's how you would show that you're changing it up. If you're doing something and it doesn't work, and then you can come back and say, this told me, or this showed me, like that. And so that's how you're going to write for component 2.
So in the written component, would it be suffice to just simply state, like, once we completed the small group, I then, did another formal assessment or informal, formative assessment, I'm sorry, and saw that John now mastered the concept by showing me blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but you don't want to use, I wouldn't use general terms like formative assessment. I would tell exactly what it was that I did.
Okay.
So if you use a graphic organizer, you can say I use a graphic organizer, or I use a T-chart, or I use whatever it is that you use. Okay. Now, and understand, I'm saying John and you're saying the group. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. The tension between using an individual versus using a group. And so I see some great jams coming in. You guys are on fire for a Saturday morning. Let me tell you, someone said on homework, I saw that students did not understand the concept. So I made a video that had them correct their work, that type of stuff. But I'm going to take you guys to somewhere else in just a minute, but I'm looking at your jams and they are awesome. Interest surveys at the end of a lesson to get student rating on the lesson. Talk to them about their learn and exit slips, checkpoints and temperature checks. This is just awesome information, guys. And so now I'm going to leave the jam and I'm going to come back. And we're going to look at our learning targets because we have about 30 minutes and we're almost there, guys. We're almost there. This is shaping up to be a really great session. So we're going to do a temperature check. So you guys I wanted you to gain a thorough understanding of the structure, content, and meaning of component 2. I think that we've done that. The significance of instructional decision-making, we're still working on that one. We talked about the relationship between the architecture of accomplished teaching and the 5 core propositions. We've done that. And we've also talked about the importance of why you need to know your students. And now, Samantha, I think this is the one that I was telling you I wanted you to kind of hone in on. Now we're going to talk about growing individual students, because here's the thing, in component 2, even though you have to continue to teach your class, you're not going to be writing about your whole class. You're going to write about your individual students. And that's going to be difficult for many of us because we're not in the habit of just focusing on 2 kids, because we focus on growing the whole class. So in addition to growing the entire class, you're going to have to focus on individual students. So guys, here's the thing. These are 2 students that are going to get a little bit more. And I wouldn't say just 2 students, because one thing that I would caution you against is putting all of your eggs in one basket. So instead of doing things to just grow, you can work with a small group of kids, so that if you have one kid who leaves and you've gotten all of this work for this kid, you can have somebody else to fall back on, or in my case, I started off with Kelsey and Jada. And I thought that Kelsey and Jada were my girls. I was going to use them. But here's the thing. Kelsey was so low I couldn't show significant growth that I could write about. I did move her, but I didn't move her at a great level. Jada was so smart that all of the teachers would pull her out of my class to come and do things for them. So she would always do her work and then get it back to me. And because I was borrowing a class, I really couldn't make a lot of noise. But I had these two boys. I had OCL and I had O'Shea. And those were the two that when I tell you I grew those boys, I grew those boys. I grew all of the kids, but I really focused on these two. So with component 2, please be reminded that you're evaluating the individual strengths and needs of just 2 kids. You're planning and implementing appropriate differentiated instruction, but you're only writing about these 2 kids. You're analyzing and modifying your instructional materials, but just for 2 kids. And so now, for those of you who downloaded that book, What Teachers Should Know and Be Able to Do, and again, especially those of you who are planning to do the scholarship, I would really recommend you go back and read through that book. It's a very easy read. It's a short book. Take notes on it and look at the language that they're using so that you can use some of that language as you begin to prepare your scholarship application. But we're going to look at managing and monitoring student learning as it pertains to Core Prop 3. And so for those of you who have the book, or if you just want to take a quick note or what have you, I'm looking at pages 27 through 29. And I'm just going to give you, we're not going to do this one on a Jamboard, but what I do want you guys to do is just take a moment and read what Teachers Should Know and Be Able to Do has to say about individual students. And after you have read that, I just want someone to unmute and tell me what stood out to you. What was significant to you? What was your aha moment from this reading? So I'm gonna give you guys 1 minute on my timer to read this paragraph, and then I want someone to just unmute and tell me what are your thoughts. Starting 1 minute, starting now. And so anyone, you can just unmute whenever you feel like it. And tell me what your thoughts. All right.
This
Good
is
morning,
Frederica.
Frederica. Good morning.
As I'm reading this, I'm actually looking at it saying that we should be doing formative assessments at all times. Those formative assessments are of course going to look different throughout the lesson from the beginning to the end. So, but I'm also looking at how I can actually help those individual students. And as I'm doing that, my instruction should also be changing. So, like for example, in my class, when I first meet a student, they of course do their learning styles assessment because I want to know what I need to do in my lesson to attract everybody's attention at any given point. Everybody can't do everything. So make sure that I'm able to see what they can do and capitalize on that. The other things that I'm looking at throughout the lesson, I have to be ready for all kinds of questions. So for example, if I see a student is struggling one way or the other, I have to be able to jump on another wavelength. So it's almost kind of like having multiple personalities in the classroom and to address everyone, but still keep everybody on the same track. So it's not just having like 1 or 2 questions that we set at the beginning of the day, but having multiples.
Frederica, I don't think that I could have worded that any more perfectly. I love how you said it's like having multiple personalities in the room, because that's what it's like. You're going to have to, as Frederica stated, you're going to have to still teach to the mass, and focus on the individuals. Frederica, thank you for that comment. That was spot on. Did anyone want to piggyback off what Frederica said? Did anyone want to add to what she said or share a differing perspective with the group? Because like I said, you know, I like to hear from you guys. I don't like to just do all of the talking, because you guys are going to have to be the ones who are going to be engaged with the writing when you return back. But that was an excellent discussion. Thank you for that, Frederica. So going once, going twice. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. And so now I want to talk to you guys about the dynamic of working with the individual versus the individual student, pardon me, versus working with the group. In your narrative, when you are writing your component 2, you're going to focus on the individual student that you are highlighting. And that is where a lot of people mess up with component 2, because they want to write about what they did for the class. They want to write about what they did for the group. You don't want to do that with component 2. With component 2, if you are focusing or writing about, they're going to, in mine, it was student A and student B. If you're writing about student A is who you should be writing about. You're going to highlight where student A was at the beginning. You're going to write about how you grew student A. You're going to address, however, address the tension of the individual versus the group and how you deal with it. So if you really feel like, well, I can't do this without writing about the group, you can say things like, you know, when my students were working in small group, I asked the students to sound out the letter A. And I noticed that John couldn't do it. So then you talk about what you did with John, but you have to weave in what you're doing with the class and what you're doing with the group. Now, me, because I was middle school and I only had a small group of kids, I taught 12 kids. They just gave me those kids. They said, if you want them, you can have them. I was like, yes, I'll take them. But you want to make sure that you're focusing on, your writing focuses on that one kid. And when you're finished, you should have a picture painted of who that child is as a learner. So yeah, you want to weave in, as I stated earlier, what you're doing for the group and how you adapted that for this student. Like I said, personally, all I did was just write about my student. And I talked about OCL, 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 OCL. This showed me, I learned this, and I did the same thing when I had to write about O'Shea. So now we're going to talk about having knowledge of your students and core proposition number 1. And again, I'm pulling from the book What Teachers Should Know and Be Able to Do. And I pull this content from pages 12 through 14. Teachers recognize the individuals in their students and they adjust their practice, as Frederica said earlier. So now I want to talk to you guys about where you're at as a teacher. We know a lot of experienced teachers, right? We do. As a national board certified teacher, you don't want to be that experienced teacher. You are learning how to become the expert teacher. And so John Hattie did a study with over 500,000 teachers. He just did a lot of surveys, and he asked questions to teachers and administrators about things that they did things that experienced teachers did versus things that expert teachers did. And he found that there was a statistical significance. There was a difference between the two. John Hattie found that expert teachers actually have more respect for their students. Expert teachers are more responsive to the needs of their students. Expert teachers are better at predicting what will happen, including any misconceptions that may arise in the classroom. Expert teachers are better at analyzing and reflecting during instruction. Expert teachers can adjust the lessons during the lesson, and they know how to improvise. Because we know some teachers who have probably been teaching for 10, 15 years, and they don't do these things. They have the experience, but they're not the experts. And so what we want for you guys, we want you to become expert teachers. And when you finish writing your component 2, you're going to show that you understand the needs of students, which does indeed make you an expert teacher. Now, if you want to go back and read that article, I have it for you guys. It is inside of the resources folder, so you can go back and read it if you would like to do that. And so now I am going to give you guys a poll. I want to see what you're thinking. All right, so I'm about to launch the poll, so you guys should be getting the poll. What influence did Hattie find to have the strongest, that should be impact, I misspelled that, guys, my bad, to have the strongest impact on student achievement? What do you guys think John Hattie said had the strongest impact on student achievement? Was it instructional quality, the quality of the instruction that the teacher is delivering? Was it students' disposition to learn? Are kids ready to learn and receive the instruction? Was it feedback? Or was it parental involvement? So we have 2 out of 10 people have responded to the poll. 6 out of 10 have responded. We're at 7, 8, 9. We're at 100%. So I'm going to end the poll and I am going to share the results with you guys. So this is what you guys said. 2 of you said instructional quality. 2 said, and this is no right or wrong here. So 2 said students' disposition to learn. 5 said feedback, and 1 said parental involvement. So, why are we even doing this poll, Ms. Pickens? Because we want to see what research says has the strongest impact on student achievement, so we can ensure that as we are preparing to become National Board Certified Teachers, that we're doing what the research says. And so I want you guys to think about those results. I'm gonna stop sharing now, and we're gonna take a look at what John Hattie said. I give you a hint. By adding to their repertoire of assessment methods and by monitoring student progress regularly, accomplished teachers provide students, families, caregivers, and themselves with constructive feedback. So y'all, John Hattie from his research found that feedback is one of the top things that teachers can do to have an impact on student achievement. Isn't that something? Feedback. And so now I want to talk to you guys about how you provide feedback to students, families, caregivers, and even to yourselves. So we're finna get ready to do one of our last jams. I think we may have maybe one more, but how do you guys provide feedback? I want you guys to go ahead and jump on and let's start jamming. I want to know, how do you provide feedback to your students, to families, to caregivers? And I left up the jams from the session that I had Wednesday. So you guys can kind of look and see. And you may be wondering, well, why is she keeping all of this stuff up here? Because you may get some ideas about things that you're not doing. If you see something that your colleagues are doing and you're thinking, oh, I never thought about that, I can do that, then you can use any of the things that we have, because this is a safe place for you guys to share content and information with one another. And so from the last session, we have class dojo messages. And if you want to put up something that has already been posted, that's fine as well. But we have class dojo messages, personal sidebars, conferences. Oh, I love this one. catching parents in the drop-off and pickup lane. And can you write about that in your national board work? Yeah, you can. You can write about that. Anything that you do, you can write about it with national board. So we have students, verbal comments, parents, remind, email. We have virtual conferences and emails. We have, let's see, what else do we have? Okay, thank you for moving that jam. We have notes on papers. We have comments on assignments. So these are some things that you guys do to provide students with feedback. And I'm just thinking about some additional things that you can do. You can do student conferences. If you're going to do a student teacher conference, I would tell you to make sure that you are writing down what the student said, or that you are recording your conferences, some type of audio, so that when you go back and you're writing about it, you can talk about some of the things that the student said as part of your conferences and say, this let me know that she was ready to move on like that. So good information, guys. So I am going to go ahead, and what else did we get? Someone said graded paper sent home weekly. That's good. We have in-test corrections. We have remind and email. Those are things that you guys can write about, but it's so important that we give our students that feedback, because feedback is how they grow. And so kids are in the habit of getting feedback from their teachers. But in knowing your students, guys, it's also important for you to receive feedback from your students about how they're doing. We can't be the only ones who are giving feedback to our kiddos. They need to be giving you feedback. Let them tell you, where am I going with my learning? Where am I now with my learning? How can I, as a student, close the achievement gap? And so one of the things that I did when I was working on my national board work, and this was something that I did as a classroom teacher as well. When I have an assignment that I think I might use this assignment for national board or what have you, you're gonna have to do a rubric for every assignment. So get into the habit of doing that, even if it's just something that you adapted from Ruby Star, all right? You're going to have to give your kids a rubric. And one of the things that I did, guys, I would grade my kids' work and I would give them the rubric that had all of my comments and what have you on it. But then I would have a second rubric. And on that second rubric, it would look just like the first rubric, except I left a space down at the bottom for comments. And so before I gave my students my rubric back, which showed how they really did, I would let them assess themselves on the rubric. After the assignment, I would give them a rubric and I would tell them, now score yourself. And in the comment section, I want you to explain to me why you gave yourself the grade that you gave yourself. And that would put kids in a place to where they were like, oh, wait a minute, I gave myself all 100s. Now I got to explain. And so after you do it with your kids a couple of times, they're going to start to be very honest with you. And you just have to let them know, now you're not going to get credit for the rubric that you did during your self-assessment, but it's very important for your growth and your development. And we're going to sit down and compare what I gave you versus what you gave you. And that's how kids the light bulb starts to come on in their own head. Nothing is greater than when kids say, oh, because that means that they're thinking, the light bulb is on. You're getting ready to move that child to a higher level of cognitive complexity. When you hear the, oh, that means they get it. So just something that I do to help self-assess students. But I do want you guys to think about that. And so I did have one more Jamboard And this is the last one. How do your students assess themselves? How do they assess themselves? And if your kiddos are not assessing themselves, and when I say assess themselves, I mean more than just where they grade their own work. Because actually, if you're giving them the answers and they're just grading their own work, then are they truly assessing themselves? How do you teach your kids how to look at their work and determine how they did? How do you set up your classroom so that kids can monitor their own growth? When I was in the classroom, I'm just kind of old school. I like technology, but I'm low technology. I only use technology when I need it. I still required that my kids kept what I called an interactive student notebook. And so I would give them some little, and if I can find it, gosh, it's really good. If I can find it, I'll share it with you guys. But when we had a big assignment, like a writing assignment, I would let them track their progress and how they were doing, and they would talk to me about how they felt they were doing in meeting the big goal at the end. And so how do your students assess themselves? How do you determine that your kids get it? Sometimes I will use cups. I have a green cup, and I learned this method from Miss Hill. I would have a green cup, a yellow cup, a red cup when my kids were working in groups, and they would have to keep a cup on the table, and that cup would tell me where they felt they were at as it pertained to learning. And those cups work really well on video as well. So just a side thought. So let me hear from you guys. Go ahead and just put something on the jam. Let me know how your student, and if your students aren't assessing themselves, leave me a note and say, we need to work on that. We need to work on that. And it's okay if you're not there yet, because we're here to grow, we're here to learn. But if your kiddos aren't assessing themselves, really think about that. We need to work on that, because they should be able to tell you where they're at with the learning. You want your kids to get to a place to where they can say, you know what? I don't get it. And if you put, we need to work on that, that's fine. I don't know who you are. So you're really putting it anonymously. Nobody knows who you are, because you guys are like birds and antelopes and frogs. Those are the things. They don't show me your name on the Jamboard. But if you know that you need to work on that, just put on there, we need to work on that. And look at some of the things that your colleagues have posted and see if that's something that you might want to do. Like we have peer edit using a rubric. After small groups record themselves and share out what their peers discussed and learned. All right, that's good stuff right there. Whoever who posted that, that's good stuff. We have peer review in pairs. Students make corrections based on what was discussed in different colors. That's good stuff. That's giving the ownership back to the kids. And so we have some more, we need to work on this. That's okay. But you want to relinquish the power and give the power back to the kids. You want to hear their voices. They should be able to say, you know what, I didn't get this. Even if it's you giving your kiddos a survey at the end and you ask your kids, how do you feel like you mastered the concept of whatever? And if you have little people, you can do things as simple as whiteboards. They sell them in Dollar Tree. Give them a whiteboard. And when you ask them, now guys, how many of you feel like you really understand what the letter A meant? And let them hold it up in the air. Smiley face, yes, or smiley face, no. That's them telling you how they learned. And you can just write down how many smiley faces, or just have your checklist and go through and just check how they did. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, real quick. And you know that the one that you're working on, if they got to know, you can write about that. And when I asked them how they learned the letter A, I noticed that John had a sad face, or John had a red color, or John had no, or however you want to do it as an elementary teacher, so that your kids, don't feel like you're calling them out. You guys are really good at that. But you want to make sure that you have a way for kids to tell you for themselves whether or not they master the concept. So just think about that, guys. And so selecting students. For component 2, you're going to select 2 students. You want to pick kids who have different instructional challenges. Don't pick 2 kids who are both having the same problem. So with OCL, I knew that OCL was a very, very reluctant learner. He was very reluctant. If I would let him sit in the class the whole day and look at me and say nothing, he would do it. I knew that O'Shea was just the opposite. O'Shea wanted to finish up everything so he can say done and look at me. So I knew that I had 2 kids with different instructional challenges. Why do you want to pick kids with 2 different instructional challenges? Because it's going to show your range as a teacher, okay? You want to pick kids who are going to give you enough analysis to support writing 13 pages, right? You don't want to pick the smartest kid in the classroom. Because if you pick the smartest kid in the classroom, or if you pick your kids who are very high functioning, it's going to be difficult to show how you move them to higher levels of cognitive complexity. You don't want to pick the kids who are so low that you can't show that you move them substantially. So you want to pick kids who are kind of right there in the middle. You want to pick those kids that you can show the growth that you made with these kids. Keep more samples on kids than required. So even though you're just writing about these 2 kids, you want to keep evidence on, I kept it on 6 kids because you just never know. You may think that this is the kid you want, but as you're progressing through that lesson, you might have another kid who is really showing you what you need. So I would tell you at minimum 4. You want to keep work samples on 4, but as teachers, I know you guys, y'all gonna keep work samples on everybody in the class. But remember, you have those 2 kids that you have to show that you really, really grew them. And then finally, keep an organizational method. So if you know that you're going to use John, Teresa, O'Shea, OCL, Jada, what have you, Mary, if you know that you're going to use these kids as they are working, you need to have you a way to, and I say an organizational method because here's the thing, you're gonna have to scan their work as a PDF to upload it to National Board. So why not start getting ready for that right now? I like personally, I use my cell phone to scan all of my stuff. My personal favorite app is called CamScan, and I actually used it during National Board, and I paid a $45 premium on it every year because I use it for all things at work. So you can find you an app that works, like a CamScan. Tiny Scanner is free. I've used Tiny Scanner, but I didn't really like it. And just start taking the work that you do for your kiddos and uploading it to a folder so that you have a folder of scanned work on Jada. You have a folder of scanned work for OCL. You have a digital folder for O'Shea. Now, why do I encourage you to do digital instead of old school filing it in a green folder? Because you're going to have to upload it digitally. So that's just one of the things that I recommend. Have your goal before, during, and next. With every student that you are planning to write about for National Board, you need to have a way to determine where that kiddo was at before you started working with him or her. That's very important. You have to have baselines. You have to have whatever it is that you do as a teacher to determine where this kiddo was at. You need to have that. Like I am EAELA, so I knew that for mine, I had to do student as reader and student as writer. So as student as writer, I had to be able to tell you where that student was at as a writer before every assignment that I gave him. So just think about that. And then you want to have your during activities so you can show things that you did based on the instructional decisions that you made. And you always want to have a next. You always want to be able to talk about where you're going to move this child next. And so those are just some things for you guys to think about as you ponder over how you are going to organize your students. We want level 4s. You want to strive for a level 4. That's the highest score that you can make. And in a level 4, you're going to show clear, consistent, and convincing evidence that you have moved and grown that student that you are working with. And so if you guys want to see what a level 4 looks like, you can go to your content specific portfolios and look at the rubrics. And you can look at level 3s, 2s, and 1s as well so that you can know what not to do. But we really want to focus on that level 4. All right. And so in closing, we're right on target here, guys. Remember, for each student, you have to have a sign release form. You don't have to turn it in, but you are working with children who are youth, who are young. So you have to have a sign release form from their parents. I don't know of anyone that National Board has ever asked for it, asked to show it, but if National Board ever asks me for anything, I want to be able to produce it. And I would advise you guys to take that sign release form and upload it as, and just upload them as a digital file so that you can have it on hand if needed. Study your standards. Use the language of the standards in your writing. So you want to be able to say things like, you have one standard that says equity. You want to say things like, in order to provide an equitable environment for John, I did not give him whatever, because I knew that he could not like that. So do that, yeah. And collaborate about your work and those questions with your colleagues. If you are uncertain about what those questions are asking you to do, because they are written on a very high level, sit down with a group of people and y'all start going through those questions and saying, oh, well, what is it at? Oh, so I need to do this, like that. Collaboration is key. Just remember, you must decide which completion track is going to work best for you. Are you going to do National Board in 1 year, 2 years, or 3? So again, Ms. Hill showed you guys this already, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I did want to show you the percentages that are attached to the individualized components. So for component 1, and component 1 is going to be the assessment center. Y'all look at that. That component is 40% of your grade. And so I know people, unfortunately, who just kind of went in it without preparing for it, and they didn't do well on component 1 and they still haven't cleared, even though they've done well on other components, because component 1 is going to have the most weight. And I am going to do a deep dive on that one later. All right. And then the component that we're focused on today is 15%. The video, which is component 3, is going to be the second highest percentage point. That's 30%. That's a lot. And then component 4, which is, in my opinion, the most difficult component, is just 15%. So if you're doing a 2-year track, we recommend you do components 2 and 3 the first year and components 1 and 4 in the last year. So do you see how, with the way that we have it, we didn't put both of those big weights in the first year? And then this is the method that I recommend. I recommend doing the 3-year track. And in the 3-year track, that's the way that I did it. And I can tell you guys that if you choose to do the 3-year track, I know there were 2 other girls in my cohort and we just kind of worked together. One of the girls, her name is Lindsay. When Lindsay went into year 3, she needed 0 points. She had scored everything that she needed from components 2, 3, and 1. And there's another girl who went through it with me named Rebecca. And Rebecca and I both went into year 3 only needing 1 point off of component 4. So that's why I strongly recommend year 3, but it's what you want to do. But, you know, I just like to take my time and do it right. And so I have this resources folder for you. I've given you guys the link for it. So I'm just going to show you very quickly some items that I have in the resources folder for you that I think would be beneficial to you. For those of you who are planning to do that scholarship, this is a worksheet that can help you kind of flesh out core proposition number 1 and how that is realized in your classroom. And so I have the same thing next to it for core prop 3. I have a picture of the architecture of accomplished teaching for you if you want to go back and look at that. I really like this. I found this one. I wish that I had it. But as you are working with your kiddos, if you're looking for ways to make sure that you're asking them questions at different levels of cognitive complexity, these are question stems that you can use to really help you plan lessons and what have you. Also in your resource folder, I have for you guys, for those of you who were wanting, this is a graphic organizer that you can use to help you go through your standards. All right. And this one helps, but this is the one that I used. And so I made you guys a copy of this. This is the one that I use personally. And I just made one for each individual standard. So you'll put the name and number of your standard, your keywords and phrases. Where do you see this standard in your teaching, and what are some areas for development and growth? All right. And so it looks like we're right on track to finishing, and you can just go back, but I'm going to show you one last thing. This is a learning styles inventory that you can give your kiddos. Feel free to use it if you want to. And after they've completed it, you can just kind of go through and talk to them about how they did. All right. And so in closing, I think we hit all of our learning targets. I do have a homework assignment for you guys. It's on that Padlet. The link to the Padlet is on the page. So make sure that you go back, because I do want you guys to take a moment to really think about what your next steps are going to be. So if you say that your next steps are going to be planning and learning, what does that look like? What does that entail? What are you planning to do? All right. And so make sure that you do the Padlet. And this is a Padlet. And I also need you guys to make sure that you do the survey. The survey is how we're going to determine who was here, because it gives me your name and it gives me your email address. All right. And so as you can see, some of the students from the previous session, these are some of the things that they put on a pad. And they've been going back and they've been telling me what they're going to do. So you can kind of look at theirs and then come up with your own thing. And so we're done here, guys. A lot of information, but I think that it was good information. And so I will stay online for any of you guys if you have any questions or what have you. But if you feel like you're good and you want to go ahead and jump off, you can go ahead and jump off here. I hope you have a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. You've gotten a lot of learning in, and it's just 10 o'clock. So you still have the rest of the day to do whatever you want. On behalf of my director, Ms. Sandra Nicole Hill, and myself, Ms. Sandra Marshall Pickens, I would like to thank you guys for giving up your Saturday morning to engage in learning, because at the end of the day, it's all about student achievement. So enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I'm gonna let you guys go ahead and jump off. If you want to stay on and ask me a question, feel free to do that. See you guys later. Y'all go get busy. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, good morning. Two
Good
things.
morning.
One, can a behavior challenge be something that could be an academic issue? And how would I document their behavioral growth as it connected to their academic success?
Well, you kind of have to talk about behavior, you know what I'm saying? Because remember, you're going to be talking about the whole child.
Okay.
And so I'm almost certain that they're going to have questions that are going to ask you about who that child is as a learner. And so I can give you like an example from mine. I told you guys in my writing, I said you're going to have to talk about who your child is as a learner. And so if your student is a student who's displaying certain behavior problems, you want to be honest about that. And you want to always word it in a positive way. So I could tell you that OCL was a student who was very hesitant and reticent when it came to doing instruction. Through his own words, OCL told me that he did not plan on staying in school beyond the age of 16 because he wanted to drop out of school and move to Texas to help build the wall. OCL was a student who did not see the value and the significance of education. He felt like it was a waste of time and he never put forth a lot of effort. And with O'Shea, I told them, O'Shea was a student who liked to disrupt class. He liked to disrupt class with jokes. He thought it was funny. This was what he did. And so you are going to write about their behavior problems because they do need to get a picture of who your student is. But this is where it gets beautiful. When you start really, really working with this kiddo and you refer back to it and you say, you know, now I knew OCL was a student who was, you know, hesitant to do instruction. So these are the things that I did to kind of curb that behavior.
Okay.
My instruction. So yeah, that's how you would do that. But yeah, they're definitely going to give you a space to paint a picture of who that child is. And what was your other question?
How to access the resources, because I'm using it I'm on my phone because I've been driving everywhere. So I wanted to.
You've been very active to be on the phone. Thank you for that.
I'm multitasking. So
just make sure, Samantha, that I'm gonna email them, but I was gonna email based on the survey. So Samantha, just make sure. I'm gonna write do I have your email address, Samantha?
I'm not. Yes, because I think I emailed you.
You email me, so Samantha, I'm gonna make myself a note and I'll make sure that I email you. I'm gonna email everybody all the links, but I'll probably just have to send them to you in a separate link.
Okay, gotcha. And sidebar, I know you. You mentored me when I first started teaching.
Are you serious?
And Martha Gaskins, and we were in class together at UAB. I was pregnant and we had to teach a class.
Oh my goodness.
Just recognized the face.
Oh my goodness. Well, you see, I'm still doing it.
Me too, 19 years later.
I'm still doing it, still mentoring. Samantha, how old is your baby?
My baby that I was pregnant with then is 16. He's gonna be 17 in 2 weeks. My oldest is 19 and I have a 7-year-old.
Samantha, it's so nice to reconnect with you again. And that's awesome. That's beautiful. I love it.
The glasses. I was like, this lady.
Yeah, I'm still mentoring, still doing it. Just, you know, still trying to help teachers. It's what I do.
Cool thing.
And so you'll get through it. You'll get through it. You know, a lot of people try to make it seem like it's a whole lot harder than what it is, and I don't know why. You can do it. You know, you just have to kind of take your time and know what you're doing, but you can do it. If you are a veteran teacher, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it, because all of the stuff that we're asking you to do is stuff that you're doing anyway. All you're going to do is just show National Board what you're doing, and you are going to think, well, you know what, maybe I can do a little bit more. I can do this a little differently. So it's a good opportunity to kind of, you know, look at where you're at and grow.
Well, I'm excited because I got the scholarship through my county, so I'm excited.
Congratulations! And you know what? You don't want to waste that money. That's a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
How many years are you gonna do yours in?
I want to knock it out in a year. My mom passed like this summer, like a day after I met with them with the.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so I want to knock it out to keep me focused on something else.
Are you in graduate school or anything like that?
No, you know, I'm 19 years in.
Okay.
Yeah, I have my EPS.
Doing it in 1 year is a challenge. I would recommend you at least do it in 2, because let me tell you, you're gonna have plenty of work to do. You're gonna have plenty.
I'm gonna end up doing 2.
Yeah, do it in 2, because let me tell you, I'm not really concerned so much so about components 2 and 3, and not even the assessment center, because the assessment center, honestly, it's over with in a day. You prepare for it, you go in, you take your test, and then you're done. But component 4, it's really hard. It's hard. Component 4 is like doing all of the work for components 2 and 3 and 1 all combined. And when you jump into component 4, it will mess with you mentally, because they're asking you to do so much, and you have to reach out to parents, community members, teachers in your building. It's not just your students with component 4.
Oh Lord.
So I wouldn't tell anybody to do component 4 with anything else other than component 4.
Gotcha.
But you can do it. You got this, girl. You got
That's
this.
what.
Yeah, you
Well,
got it. You
thank
got this.
And
Yes,
I'll be
ma'am.
emailing.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Have a good one.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Hey, Miss Pickens, this is Jennifer with Birmingham City Schools, and I know you're familiar with the Gifted program.
I am.
So you know my situation.